if we actually look at these mutations, what are we seeing? We're seeing a buildup of them. We're seeing living organisms. They're showing this process of devolution called genetic entropy. Mutation accumulation causes the genomic deterioration. How are you going to get rich by losing money? And you're not showing me any type of mutation that adds new information, Willem. Just give me one example. You're just explaining to me.
I just told you viruses do it, and plus there's SMPs. I don't know why you keep thinking that we are devolving, like we're becoming lesser and lesser creatures as the more that we evolve or something. That doesn't make any sense. Evolution is a lot like this. It's a lot like you growing up. Right? Can you actually, I mean, it's a gradual process, but it's only years from the time that you're a baby to when you're an adult. It's only years. Evolution is the exact same thing, really, except it's over a period of hundreds of thousands of years or millions of years. But if, I mean, but if I were to ask you the question, well, when at what time were you no longer a baby or no longer a child and then you were an adult? Or when were you no longer a child and you were a teenager? You're not going to be able to really pinpoint it.
Yeah, but that information is there for my growth as a human being. That information for a human being is there. So I don't understand how that.
It's an analogy. It's an analogy of how evolution works, and the time frame, as well as not being able to pinpoint an exact thing because it's a slow progress.
Okay, let me ask this, because no one's given me an answer yet in this chat. Do you believe there are limits? For example, can we get a dog as small as a flea? Because, William, we know there are animals as small as a flea, like a flea. Or can we get a dog as big as an elephant? Because we know there are animals as big as an elephant, like an elephant.
Are you talking about like the Amazing Shrinking Family or something? Or Honey, I Shrunk the Kids? What are you talking about?
I'm asking you, do you believe there are limits in the genetic code and in the changes we see?
Well, the thing is you get to a certain point where certain things are just simply going to no longer function, because it's almost like having an automobile. You can only make it with so many parts and so small before it just simply isn't going to really function anymore.
Now that's evidence of degrading. That's evidence of entropy.
No, that isn't. That isn't. That's not. No, it isn't. What that is, okay, because what you just asked me, you asked me, can we have a dog the size of a flea? Yeah. And it wouldn't function the same way as a normal dog.
Because the further we go from the norm, I mean, look at a Chihuahua. All these years of artificial
no, it's because cells. I mean,
as a Chihuahua,
atoms and cells and everything like that. We can't keep shrinking them. I mean, it's like Legos. I mean, it's like there's a certain size. We kind of have to accept it and deal with it. And then, so you can only build so small before you can't put any more shit in there.
Okay, let me use this analogy then, since you like analogies. Let's use the English language, okay, as an analogy. There's 26 letters, right? Now let's take a book. Information based on those 26 letters. How many typographical errors and misspellings? That's what mutations are. How many of those, and how long is it going to take to turn that English book into, say, a Korean or a German or a Chinese? Because we know that those languages are different codes.
Well, how long? Well, let me ask you this. I don't have an exact answer, but I have an answer that I know that if you Googled it, it would give you an exact time frame. It took as long as it took to make the English language, because the English language didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's not like Adam and Eve. It's a derivative of things like, of German, or maybe of French, or maybe of Latin, and it's derivative. Right.
Yeah, but
and so it's evolved. It's turned from one ancient language into what it is today, just like modern day French and modern day German and modern day whatever.
Yeah, but the thing is, that's a bad analogy, because languages have evolved through intelligence.
I just told you it evolved.
Yeah, through intelligence. Molecules to man evolution had no intelligence.
It has nothing to do with intelligence. It has to do with just people traveling and the different usage of language and people not being able to pronounce things correctly. You have to look at you look at the United States. We have people in New York that speak with an accent, and it sounds different than Jersey, and it sounds different than Boston. It sounds different than North Carolina. It sounds different than the West Coast. It sounds different from Texas. It sounds different from Canada, and it sounds different in different parts of the UK. All the same language. Is it based because on intelligence? Absolutely not.
A good analogy for that is, do you call it soda or pop?
Well, yeah, and then also the dictionary doesn't really define things as much as it defines the popular usage of the word. It's not really like an end all be all of that. This is what the word means, because over a period of time, these words morph, they change.
But see, what I'm saying is, if I give you an English book, let's say we even use gene duplication, because that's kind of what I'm trying to get out of you. Because if you look at the evolutionary literature, they'll say gene duplication is the mechanism that adds new information. But if I give you another copy of, say, that English book, now you have a second copy of the same book, okay? Now let's start taking our pen and putting misspellings, typographical errors, erasing letters, whatever it is, to that second book. All you have is a messed up copy of the original book. So there's no new information. There's no uphill change. There's no mechanism for large scale evolution. I mean, do you understand what my point is here, William?
I got a
I'm going to tell you, I don't understand it, because I think that you have a misunderstanding or a misrepresentation in your head of what evolution is.
Evolution is changing.
You're talking. You keep bringing up a book and you're saying information and somebody changing words around and all this other stuff, but that's not what evolution is. That's not what evolution is.
What is the what's the engine of evolution? It's mutations, right?
Well, it's not just mutations. There's also natural selection, and there's different types of breeding, and sometimes you end up having sometimes a cataclysmic event that just wipes out a species, you know, and then you end up having other things grow.
Extinction is not evidence for evolution, though.
Extinctions are, because what happens is if you end up having a species that is dominant over a certain area, and also they feed off a lot of different things, or maybe other things feed off of them, and then they end up getting wiped out for whatever reason, it's going to change the ecosystem. And by changing the ecosystem, you're going to end up either you're adapt or you're going to die. So it ends up changing the genetic landscape. So extinction absolutely does do something like that.
And I totally agree with you on that one. But see, the changes we see, William, they're based on that pre-existing information. There's never any new information added to the genome. A dog will always produce a dog. A pine tree is always going to produce a pine tree, and an elephant.
Okay, then I mean, okay. Well, all of the different types of dogs and stuff we have different breeds of dogs, and they all supposedly, I don't know how true this is, came from the gray wolf originally because of selective breeding. Okay, but the thing is there's actually, they have what's known as a species barrier. And the species barrier, a lot of times, it's not only for things that have to deal with like viruses or bacteria or different types of diseases or whatever, but it also has to do with, you know, who can actually impregnate whatever. Hence, this is the whole reason why you're never going to find a minotaur, right? But when it comes to certain dogs, there's actually some dogs that can't breed with other dogs, even though they originally started from all of the same thing. And
there's lots of hybrid animals like that. There's lots of hybrid animals like that.
Yeah, and because what's happening is they're slowly, but this has been put at an accelerated speed because of the selective breeding from human beings getting involved. Okay, but I forgot what my point was. Kind after kind. I think you were talking about something like that, right?
I understand your point there, but the thing is, if you put a picture, okay, let's say you put 5 pictures: a dingo, a wolf, a chihuahua, a Great Dane, even a fox, and a banana, and you ask that kid, tell me which animal is different than the other. They're going to say the banana, because we all know that the wolf, the dog, the fox, and the domestic dog, it's the same kind of animal. I would agree with that. That doesn't prove evolution at all.
Well, it shows that there's a change within the species. There's variance within the species themselves. And this is over a short period of time, and it's something that we can actually visually see. But if you gave it about another I don't know, give it another 500 years, maybe 1,000 years, or maybe even 10,000, whatever, and you looked at the modern day versions of those, you would see that they would be completely different than what they once were.
Do you believe a dog population today came from a non-dog population long ago and far away?
When you say long ago, can you give me a time frame?
I mean, you know, let's just say a dog today came from a non-dog. You can give it as much time as
I would put it this way. That's almost like saying, do you believe birds came from dinosaurs? Well, dinosaurs and birds essentially kind of are the same thing. And we call dogs dogs, but that's not really what they are evolutionarily speaking. You know, it's just like we call ourselves human, but we're part of the ape family. right?
Well,
And
you believe we're part of
you end
the
up seeing, no, we are part of the apes. We are part of the apes. I mean, and it's
okay, let me ask you a question.
genetics.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Can a Chinese person and a white person, can they interbreed?
Yes.
Can a white person interbreed with a chimp?
No, they're too far gone.
Okay.
They're too far separated.
I would say they're two different kinds. They're not related.
Well,
at all.
no, but there's certain dogs that can't even breed with other dogs.
Well, maybe due to physical.
And there's also certain fish that can't breed with other fish. There's certain plants that can't cross-pollinate with other plants. Does it mean that they're not plants?
Well, for example, there's a certain species of rabbits that can't interbreed with another species of rabbits.
Yeah, but they're both rabbits, right?
Kind of animal. It's still a rabbit,
right?
And based on those mutations, natural selection, and environmental pressures, sure, they've
gone
too far.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm the same thing as a gorilla, and I'm not saying I'm the same thing as a chimpanzee, but we're relatives. We're relatives the same way as a Great Dane.
We're relatives.
No, it's not that I believe. It's provable.
You can't prove that. How
yes,
can you prove that?
You can prove it. Look, you can prove it with the fossil record. You can prove it with the chromosomes. You can prove it with DNA. I mean, good God, our DNA is so close to one of a fruit fly and even a pig. It's not even ridiculous. I mean, not even ridiculous. It's ridiculous on how close our DNA is.
If I were to look at any animal in the animal kingdom and say, based on the phenotype, which animal probably shares the most DNA with me? Obviously, we're going to say a monkey or a chimp because they most resemble us physically. That's just evidence of design. That's like saying, okay.
How is that evidence of design?
Okay, what you're saying logically would be the lug nuts from a Pontiac will fit on a Chevy Cruze. Ooh, that proves they.
That's actually possible since Chevy makes both.
Okay, so yeah, exactly. But it's not based on common ancestry from a skateboard billions of years ago. It's based on common design.
You keep going to this default position of design.
Of course, that's my model. It's
but your model is magic.
Well, it's not magic because you're
magic. Yeah, it is. It's magic. I mean, because you're not actually looking at the evidence and saying, what does this evidence suggest? You're looking at the evidence and saying, how can I twist it and warp it so that way I can still believe that there's a sky daddy that ended up making us out of dirt clods?
Well, you're the one who believes you share a common ancestor with a banana plant. That's just as much a religion as mine is. We see genetic.
It's not religion. It's because this is what the evidence suggests.
Okay.
And let me put it to you like this. Christians believe in evolution too. You guys are just pessimists. Because at one time, at one time we lived to be 900 years old. We could walk on water. We could talk to donkeys. We could talk to God. We could do all sorts of cool stuff, right? But we can't do it anymore, right? We could part oceans and shit. We can't do it anymore. And so essentially, at one time, we were fucking pretty awesome. In fact, Adam and Eve, they weren't even supposed to die. They were supposed to be immortal, right? And then so there's that degrading that you were looking for. You believe in evolution. You're just a pessimist. I mean, modern day evolutionists, we don't see it as degrading or we don't see it as anything improving. We just see it as change. Because that's all it is it's just change.
We see it as change, variety. It's because of the loss of genetic information. Like I said,
no, it is not. There is no. The human genome is not getting smaller and smaller and smaller. There is no genome that's doing that. You cannot use entropy when it comes to genetics. You cannot do it because it's not the same thing.
Okay.
And entropy also has to do with a closed system.
All entropy is when it comes to our human bodies, okay? Biological entropy. The accumulation of mutations over time is degrading our information system. We're going downhill. We're not going up.
There's changes. There's changes. Some of these changes do absolutely nothing. Sometimes they damage us.
Some are neutral, but they stay in.
And some of them are beneficial. But even the ones that are beneficial, a lot of times you're not even going to notice a difference until it ends up mutating a few more times and it goes down the line of many, many births and all this other stuff. And then all of a sudden you end up seeing it. I mean,
you see, in the biblical model, Adam and Eve were given a significant amount of design variation, William. The built-in alternatives God put in Adam and Eve are scrambled over time. And now traits could arise through this process. That's what we see.
So you believe the opposite. Okay, so I'm far-fetched for thinking that we evolved from a common
I
ancestor.
gotta go.
But at the same time, do you believe that woman like Eve was actually made from Adam's rib?
Absolutely. That's what the Bible says. And you know what? I admit I have
God. And you think the stuff I think?
problem that
Where is the proof? Where is the proof that a woman came from a rib?
well, see, my religion is based on historical science and
No,
operational science.
Don't you even dare insult science or history. Talking about a woman was invented or came from a dude's rib. And also don't insult things like evolution or even what the hell's the word I'm looking for that everybody always ends up confusing the two.
Natural selection.
No. It's from how life started. Right now, my mind is it's
Abiogenesis.
yes, abiogenesis. People often confuse that, but you have a problem with saying, well, you know, there was maybe some amino acids and maybe some electricity. Who fucking knows? We ended up having a cell. It did this and it crawled out. You say that's horrible, but you don't have a problem saying that, well, God picked up a couple of dirt clods, blew on them, and there you go. That's how man showed up.
See, if there actually is a supernatural force known as God, he's able to
Really prove it.
Science and do those types of things.
Can you give me evidence? Can you give me evidence of this God?
Okay.
Because if you can, you're going to get a Nobel Prize.
If I'm walking through a forest and there's no footprints, there's no evidence that anybody has been around, but I see a painting hanging on the tree, I'm either going to convince that that painting created itself out of natural processes, or
how would you know what the painting is?
Finish my thought.
How would you even know what the painting is? You'd be ignorant of it.
He designed it. I'm sorry, what's that, William?
No, you would be completely ignorant of what the painting is because there would be no other people. There would be no art. There would be no culture. It'd be the first time you ever saw it. It might just blend right into the landscape. How would you know it was a painting? And even if you did know it was a painting, why would you assume another person did it or there was intelligence behind it? Because you just said you're the only person that exists. It'd be silly to think somebody else did it if you know you're the only one that exists.
I'm not saying I'm the only one that exists. I'm just saying that.
I thought you said you were the only one that was alone in a forest and you're the only one that existed or something.
Well, if I looked at a car, I don't need to know who made the car to know that somebody designed it. I don't ever have to meet the guy that actually made it, but I can look at that and say, wow, look how complex this is.
Well, that's because
look how complex a cell is. It's almost more complex than the space shuttle. And you want to say that that came about through natural processes? I mean, come on, that's not science. That's something you believe.
No, it is science. But we don't know. Look, we don't know all the answers to everything. I think there's some that we're simply never going to know, right? There's just no way of us knowing. But just because we don't know the answer doesn't mean that the default position should be magic.
Well, do you believe that
in the past, think about this. In the past, how many times was the default position magic? The person's sick. It must be evil spirits. You know, oh, look at our wheat is dying. Must be witches and evil spirits or some shit like this. Right, and it's always magic. And how many times has magic ever been the correct answer? And how many times has magic been disproven? You're going to see that as history progresses, more and more magic is disproven, and it's never, ever, ever been correct.
See, the thing is, if you actually look at the Bible, it's always been correct scientifically.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't, because it's full of errors.
Finish my thought. I just let you talk. The Bible talks about God sitting upon the circle of the earth. People back then thought the earth was flat. The Bible didn't. The people who wrote the Bible didn't. The Bible also talks about God hanging the earth upon nothing. That's talking about the earth hanging free float in space. That indicates gravity. This is science. This is accurate science. This whole magic thing.
No, it isn't, though, because it also ends up suggesting that we end up having a dome over us.
I don't see anywhere that it says. I see somewhere that's
in Genesis.
Well,
the firmament, yeah.
Well, it talks about God created the heaven. Then it talks about him breaking up the heaven into three heavens, which are the firmament. So that would be the sky, space, and the third heaven. Paul says
what Bible are you reading? What Bible are you reading?
The King James Bible. Which Bible are you reading?
King James, typically.
Exactly. So it's
sometimes a young literal translation, depending. But the thing is it doesn't say that it broke the heavens up into three categories. It doesn't say that.
Well, you can infer that because it talks about how God created the heaven
Well,
and
no,
the earth.
you can infer that if that is in your mind what you want to create, and that's the image you want. Because
Okay, when Paul said he went to the third heaven, but Genesis 1 says God created the heaven and the earth. Then it talks about the firmament where the birds fly and the firmament where he placed the sun, moon, and stars. There's three heavens. I don't understand any other way you could explain that. Sky, space, and the third heaven where God goes. Obvious.
it pretty much clearly states